my name's Brian, Begin.com co-founder, AWS serverless hero, which means I'm a nerd that creates content for Amazon serverless stuff. Created a project called OpenJS Architect that's for building serverless apps, and I used to work on a project a long time ago at Apache called Cordova. If you've ever done mobile stuff, you might have run into that. So we hear the term DX a lot these days, and it's one of those kind of catchphrases that's starting to mean nothing or maybe means everything. We hear people describing user experiences for developers, but I don't think we have good consensus on what this term means and how it applies to us in our everyday lives. So this talk is really just exploring the term in all of its forms and what it is and what it isn't. I don't pretend to have any actual answers for you, but I'll hope that you can walk away with a lot more questions, and maybe together we can create better software. So in this talk, I want to talk about why is developer experience important? Why is it important to us? What it is, what it might not be, because sometimes you can define things by what they aren't, which is kind of confusing. How we can improve developer experience, and what do we get out of that? So first thing is why is this who cares about developer experience? Well, who here is a developer? Right, so it's self-interest really ultimately, because if developer experience is better, then that's better for me. I've heard people say that happy people are more productive, but I know a lot of happy people that smoke tons of pot and they don't do anything. So I don't think that's actually necessarily true. Certainly if you're happy, you're going to probably put more of yourself into something. Number two is probably the most convincing here. If you are a developer and your life can get better, then we're motivated for that. We're incentivized for that to happen. But probably the best reason, I think, is that a great developer experience can empower better outcomes. Better outcomes and user experiences. And that's really what we're here for. So then comes the question, what is developer experience? And I did the thing where Google's kind of useless now thanks to AI, but I Googled around, see if I could find some answers. And maybe you've heard of the Nielsen-Norman group. They're kind of famous for user experience, maybe the guys around user experience. And so to them, user experience encompasses all aspects of an end user's interaction with a company, products, and services. And I kind of like that as a term for user experience. And you could maybe just flip that and be well, developer experience is all the stuff. It's not a very satisfying answer. It just feels vague and maybe kind of corporate. So I went to ChatGPT and was what is developer experience? And it gave me this answer. Developer experience refers to the overall experience developers have using a product, platform, API, or other tool intended for software. And that's actually pretty good. That's kind of what the other guys were saying. And then I hit refresh, and it gave me another answer that was also kind of good. And nothing to do with that one. I hit refresh and gave me another one that was kind of good. So I don't know if they know. GitHub has been doing a ton of really great work here, and you can just totally blank me out and hang out on Twitter or whatever. Just go to this link, and all these links will be at the end. But yeah, these links work. So if my toolbar came, it would show it. But they have so much good information about what they're doing for developer experience, and Microsoft in particular lately has been doing tons of science around this, actual studies that have been traveling for years. So strong recommend to read what they think. This comes into outcomes. So whether it positively or negatively impacts software development, that's suddenly very interesting to me. This is a lot less vague. This now has material outcomes are related, and I like that a lot. Because pretty much everything we do comes with an it depends attached. And if you just went to Dave's talk, that's pretty much what it boiled down to. It's well, the situation at hand is local to your circumstances. We can't really give full broad guidance. Here's how to build software and everyone has a good time. It's not going to happen. So one way to help us figure out what a good developer experience is and how to define it will be to figure out what isn't a good developer experience. So developer experience is not a particular tool or technology. I often hear people say, oh, I don't like the DX of that tool. And it's like, that is not developer experience. The DX of a particular tool or technology is independent of DX in general. It's not a specific framework. Like Rails is not DX. It's not a specific methodology. Agile is not DX. It's not a particular work environment or context. And that is also interesting because that does impact your experience. Working in a crowded office or a tiny apartment with a toddler is a part of your experience. But that's not developer experience. That's not what it is. So what is what is it, like the things that make up a great developer experience? Well, I think it just works. We all tend to agree that's like a thing. Like when you take that new library and you install it and it does what you expect, it's delightful because that never happens. You're like, oh, this worked. It just works. I want to be careful with this, but frictionless and fast. So often we'll talk about software and we'll be like, you know, what's good software? And we'll say good software is fast. I think performance is kind of like security. It should be a given. It should be built in. It's really only noticeable in its absence. And so like, yeah, it's frictionless and fast, but the goal isn't necessarily fast. Fast is just something it should be. It feels safe. So it feels like this is a choice that I'm not going to pay for later. If something goes wrong, this is not going to impact me negatively. It feels like a good choice that everyone's going to agree, because every bit of software we have is a decision. And those decisions pile up, and sometimes those decisions, in hindsight, don't look so good. And that leads into stability and reliability. This is something I think we all can agree that we can improve on in software these days. Stable software that works the way we expect. It's reliable. Every time I run it, I get the same result. No flaky tests, no breaking changes on a minor, that kind of thing. And the main thing for me, and I'm glad Dave brought this up too, it should feel fun. Like we should have fun. This shouldn't be a bummer. You know, like so much of our work can be such a frustrating, difficult, like, oh, this is so hard. Like, no, we want to be like, this is fun. I'm doing a good job. I feel productive. That's good DX. But can we sort of like, we can't say like, oh, good DX is when it's fun. That seems like a little too non-academic. So like, can we come up with like a stronger definition for what is a good DX? Back to Microsoft and GitHub. I actually think this is one of my favorite quotes about this. So developer experience encompasses how we feel and how we think and value our work. And that's super strong to me. Like this is getting more into tangible things about the what we're doing. And they're not just like editorializing. This is coming back to, have you heard of DORA report here? Only a few of you. Okay, so this is, I'm pretty stoked to share this with you. This is like, if you take anything from this talk, find the links and read about the DORA report. This is early science into developer velocity and how we make our decisions. And this has been going on for, I think, 7, maybe 8 years now of empirical study about developer metrics. So what can we do to make ourselves more effective? And what does make us more effective as software developers? Spoiler, it comes down to stability and speed. And these are things that enable each other. But this is good because we can actually make empirical arguments based on science. We don't have to be like, yeah, we should have tests because that guy said we should have tests. Like, no, actually, maybe we should have tests, maybe we shouldn't have tests. But what we can know is if we have more deployment frequency, and we're iterating faster, that we're going to have better outcomes. And yeah, this is science, not just stuff we're making up. So for the DORA folks or the now space folks at Microsoft, they kind of look at it through this lens where it's about feedback loops or iteration, about getting developers into a flow state. So when that moment when you're like, I'm having fun, I'm productive, when time melts away and the code is just coming out and you're feeling like everything's going right. And low cognitive load, and this one's tricky because we have to hold these systems in our head, and it's happened to all of us. You've been working really hard and you're thinking, and then you get a notification and you're like, shit, I just lost it all. And then you gotta like get yourself back into that space, and it's like this almost cold start happens. So low cognitive load, you get back into that flow state a lot faster. Those feedback loops are tighter. You're doing good work. I won't make you read all of this, but this digs into the ideas from space in Dora report and how we can apply those to get better flow states, better iteration, that kind of thing. Definitely follow up reading. And this is kind of a nasty, feels very enterprisey to say KPIs. I mean, I used to work at Adobe, and they'd make us do these things, and we'd have this whole process where we'd create these metrics, and then we'd reorg every 3 months, and the old metrics didn't matter anymore, but we thought we'd have to have them anyways. So it's triggering for me to see that on this slide, but these are good. These could be good KPIs, and the KPIs could be things that actually affect good change. Like maybe we want lots of iterations, not necessarily lots of passing or failing tests. That's not a great KPI, but lots of iterations is. And this is kind of leading into the thing that really makes me nervous about productivity. I don't want to, be the guy who's like Henry Ford, more widgets off the assembly line. That's not what it's all about. But I do feel like effectiveness is a thing, and as developers, we want to create value. We want to feel like we're doing work that matters. We want to know that we're having an impact that's positive. And so productivity is a part of that. This isn't necessarily about widgets on an assembly line. I want to loop back to what is not DX, because it comes up. We have some ideas now that's a rough working idea that what DX could be. But when we talk about DX out in the wild, when you're on Twitter or inside of a Discord, there's a lot of logical fallacies. And if you want a good shortcut for being a really good arguer on the internet, you got to learn about logical fallacies, because you can immediately invalidate your own arguments by making poor ones. So logical fallacies are arguments that sound convincing but are based on faulty logic and are therefore invalid. This isn't something I just made up. This is something the ancient Greeks discovered. So this is old news. This is not new news. But if you want to make strong arguments, you shouldn't use logical fallacies. So there are a few logical fallacies that we see a lot in the term developer experience and around it, and I want to nuke those right out the gate here. So there's appeals to popularity, appeals to authority, straw man, appeal to novelty, reduction to the absurd. So let's dig into these. So appeal to popularity, and I threw in the Greek because it sounds funny to me, but argumentum ad populum, okay. So this is claiming something's good because the large majority think so. Does anyone here think McDonald's makes the best hamburger? No, but they made the most. There's been over 1 billion served. I'm from Canada, and maybe some of you agree, but Nickelback, objectively bad music. Really popular. So appeals to popularity. Now, it doesn't mean that the wisdom of the crowd is wrong. There's a reason everyone likes these things. But the fact is, being popular isn't what makes something good. It might be an indicator. So yeah, I call this the Nickelback problem. And I'm sorry if you like Nickelback. That's okay. As a Canadian, I'm supposed to. This is also why surveys are kind of tricky. We'll see surveys used to back up arguments like, 6 out of 10 developers love this tool. It's like the dentist commercial. So appeals to authority are very similar to appeals to popularity. It's kind of a related fallacy. So this is when something is made an appeal to parties having no legitimate claim to the authority in the matter at hand. This is one of Carl Sagan's favorites, mistrust all arguments from authority, which I really like. In our company, we like to say that you can't use your resume as a reason to do something. So, if you're deciding to use a particular thing just because you've done that thing before doesn't mean anything. It's whether it's applicable to the situation at hand. It's okay to be an authority too. It's just don't argue from your resume is what that boils down to. So I think straw man is basically Twitter's business model. This is refuting an argument different from the one that was being discussed, while not recognizing or acknowledging that there's a distinction. So often you'll see like, this is attacking a straw man. You're like, well, what about X? Or like kind of a whataboutism. And this is just not an argument that's valid. Appeal to novelty, this one we are all susceptible to. Everyone in that AI room is dealing with that right now. So like, this is where we prematurely claim that something's superior because it's new. And we, I'm a sucker for this one too. Like, this happens all the time. It's worth noticing that sometimes we do things for a reason. Like sometimes things happen and we grow systems and we've done them that way because it works, and that's okay. Like the foundations might be all right. We don't necessarily need to do something new for the sake of newness. Yeah, tech investors, pundits, speculators, very susceptible to this. It's funny, I bring up cryptocurrency. That one's up and down. I was at Vancouver D-Web last week, which is it used to be all about distributed web, but then it turned into Web 3. But now no one wants to admit that it was a part of Web 3, so now it's all about indie web, which is kind of funny. But yeah, we go through this a lot with appeals to novelty. And then my favorite is reduction to absurdity. And this one is actually on Twitter a lot too. This one's pretty funny. So this is where we try and establish a claim by showing the opposite scenario could lead to, an absurd contradiction. These tests are slow, so we should not write tests. Really common one, or we should have less tests. It's like, well, maybe we should speed the tests up. It's not necessary to reduce an argument to the absurd. So these are all invalid. So, something's not good DX if it's popular. It's not good DX if someone told you so. It's, not good DX for some straw man related reason, and it's not good DX if it's new. And that's all we need to say about that. I think Rails definitely caught somebody's, a lot of our emotions and drew us in. And one of the big parts of that was how Ruby always talked about it's optimized for programmer happiness. And this feels related to DX to me because DX should be fun. But I'm totally going to call bullshit on this because you can't optimize something for somebody else's happiness unless you share the same things as that person. This is very subjective. Things that make me happy probably make Matt's very sad. I like determinism. I don't like monkey patching. Rubyists love monkey patching, and that's totally cool, by the way. Go for it. Do it. But that didn't make me very happy. Also, worth looking into, Rails has this thing called its doctrine. And I think from just a marketing standpoint, this is worth reading. But if you look at logical fallacies and then use this as a chaser, it's hilarious. Because this is basically a greatest hits album of all the logical fallacies in one place, and it's called Doctrine, and it's at therails.org. So this is not DX. These are just strong marketing sites, honestly. And can we come up with a good definition for DX? So I liked productivity for the idea that we're doing a better job, but I don't like how it makes me feel necessarily. And just to go completely out of left field, there's this organization in Canada that's all about planting trees. I was stoked to read about this, and they're supposedly in every province, but they're actually not in BC. In BC, we just cut trees down. Sad but true. We protect 1% of them. But what do you think the goal of treecanada.ca is? What do you think the point of this whole organization is? It's to plant trees, man. That's their goal. Their goal isn't to use Rails or have tests or whatever. Their goal is plant more trees. They just want to plant a bunch of trees. Caterpillar, just for some juxtaposition. It's the oil sands in Canada. What I loved about this image, though, is how they photoshopped electric. Oh, yeah, that's good for the environment. So what do you think their whole purpose is? Is it to run Spring Framework? No. Yeah, it's just to sell heavy equipment. Some of it electric, apparently. Government of Canada website. The official website of the Government of Canada. Look at that beautiful site. I like how they have some like spring flowers. It's very nice. So their whole thing is to provide information to the public. Their goal isn't to dazzle you with their great design. It's to really make their stuff accessible to everybody. And that should impact how they make decisions about the experience. So this is what I want to propose would be a strong definition for developer experience. Developer experience is about the practices and tools that empower developers to create great end user experiences. So it's about empowering us to create good experiences, good outcomes for our given audience. The stuff that we need to do for a great outcome for Canada.ca is not going to be the same stuff that we'd need to do for Caterpillar.com. These are completely unrelated sets of goals. And the end users are totally different people probably. And how they access information, the devices they use to access information are going to be different. And so the DX the DX has to be diverse in order to create all these diverse experiences for these diverse audiences that we have. Okay, so let's do a very fast recap here. DX is not the same as user experience. So a user experience is about the end users, whereas the DX is about the lived experience of the developers. Now, we serve the end users in theory. So the ultimate goal of the developer experience should be to facilitate great user experiences. That's what this should be about. And, there's going to be different strategies and tactics for this, because developers are not a monolith. There's a lot of us, and we do all kinds of weird shit. There's back-end developers, there's front-end developers, there's systems engineers, there's mobile developers, and the tools and things that we use to create our experiences for end users are totally different and have just different needs. So the kind of first person to ask for creating a great user experience is going to be the customer. It's going to be understanding what they need and want. Someone that, if we determine they need or want for some reason an iOS app, it's going to be a completely set of developer experiences to get there. I'm going to get into tactics. So strategy is kind of like where you want to go, and tactics are like how you're going to get there. And I'm going to talk about two particularly, I think, good tactics. This is not in any way like a how-to that's going to be universal, but I do think there's some useful stuff here. Has anybody read Modern Software Engineering? Oh, man. Okay, best book I've read in a decade, I think. Like, up there with Pragmatic Programmer. Like, very fucking good book. Super read, all of you. Must buy, must own, must be on the shelf. So Dave took on the kind of radical thing where he wanted software engineering to be a serious term, because it kind of isn't. Like, we use that term in our resumes a lot, and that actually gets real engineers up in arms, because we don't necessarily follow the same levels of rigor and practice that you would in real engineering. Real engineering is working backwards from limits and material sciences, and Dave wanted to tackle that. He wanted to look at, can we actually bring that level of discipline and take it a step past craft? Like, kind of where we're at today is craft, where we're like, we are craftspeople. We definitely do take our job seriously and try and do better and better jobs that are like, can we take it past craft, like one step past, and actually do it real engineering, like working backwards from an empirical method. So this book is a must read. He kind of boils it down to like a few points. So for him, it's about learning and managing complexity. So software is really just like big balls of mud. And especially after Dave's talk, like agile is a bit of a tricky term. It's been polluted by a lot of consultants. Some of us may have had to go to Scrum training. Fuck, that's the worst. Some of us may even have a Scrum Master thing. I had to do it at Adobe. It's funny, they're like, you have to do this, you have to do this. So we're like, okay, we'll do it. We did it. And then after, like, how was it? We're like, it was great. It was awesome. And then we didn't follow any of the stuff they said. So, but there are nuggets of value in there. So like iteration, is a good thing. Like working in small increments and getting feedback and building up from there, like that's a good thing. Treating, Jessica talks about this a lot, treating everything as like little experiments. It's a great way of looking at it. There is no, oh no, we failed. It's like, oh no, we learned something. Like that's a much better way to work. Empiricism, so like working backwards from data. So like way less arguments about how we feel about things if we could just measure them objectively. If we could look at like, hey, this thing is 40% faster. That's pretty good. There's no argument about that. So those are all kind of things about learning. And then managing complexity, well, we've got tools for that. We've got modularity. We've got the ideas of cohesion and separation of concerns. And these are just sort of like familiar concepts for us, so I don't have to like dig too deep into it. Yeah, now can we measure these things? And can we make ourselves faster and better at what we do? And that's really like coming back to like the core, I think, of what Dave wants the empiricism thing to be about. So the two measures of effective software engineering team, stability and throughput. So like are what we're building, is what we're building doing its job, and can we add more and more value with time? And it kind of like gives us a way to justify change. As we build these systems, if we are being empirical and if we're measuring what we're doing, we can see like, oh, this change made a positive impact or a negative impact. And that gives us like tools for actually like talking about this stuff in very empirical ways. There's kind of a flip side to this. We used to joke that like sometimes the firefighters are arsonists. So like we'll have like, problems, and it's like, well, how do we get those problems? And it's like when you start peeling back like the problems that we're having, it's like, oh, actually, like if you're always fighting fires, you got to figure out who the arsonist is. And it's often me, it's like I did this. These are super related concepts to unplanned work. And discovery is a part of our job. So I think we've almost moved past the idea of estimates as an industry. We're not quite there yet, but like, how long is this thing going to take? Well, if I've done that thing before, I can give you a pretty good idea. If I haven't done it before, I'm going to lie and probably be wrong. And hopefully no one holds me to that thing. But as we build systems, we always discover stuff. There is no situation where we're not like, oh, wow, we thought of everything. And it just went to plan. The whole part of a plan is being able to change that plan. And unplanned work is a part of the plan. So this is where things might get a little spicy. So I've got my like little chili warning to myself here. Everything in our systems, and not just our software, is a dependency. And this is a thing that really leads to your day-to-day lived developer experience. There's this awesome quote that the greatest intellectual discovery of our generation is the real cause of problems is solutions. And I love that, because that is exactly what a dependency is. As we add more and more dependencies, more and more solutions, we are also creating new unique problems for ourselves that we did not discover until we installed those dependencies. We kind of have a habit these days of installing lots of stuff. Oh, I have a problem, I better get a dependency. And really every dependency is just a new problem. And I'm not like saying this is you. This is like me. I do this. Like I am the problem. I'm installing too much shit on my machine and realizing that those are creating new issues. We know that software is a liability. We all tend to agree that software is a liability. And that what software does is the asset. I think that this is non-controversial. But we kind of think that as soon as it goes into node modules that it's not our problem anymore, and that's just not true. Like as you add more and more stuff into your dependency tree, you are adding more liabilities. And Some of those liabilities you might not have even audited. You don't really know how they work. They might have been installed as like a second order dependency and have a backdoor. Who knows? Yeah, so our dependencies just code? No, they are not. So I'm gonna dig into this one, and some of these are also a little spicy. Anybody remember Silicon Valley Bank? That's a dependency, it turns out. So when we were starting our company, everyone told me, gotta use Silicon Valley Bank. And I was like, well, we're using RBC, we're a Canadian company, so, whatever, we have a bank. And they're like, no, everybody uses them. It's like an appeal to popularity. And I was like, why does everybody use them? Well, basically it's free money. It's free money, no interest loans. You just got to keep all your capital with them. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like a problem? No, everyone uses them. We know how that story went. Your payment provider is also a dependency. Where they operate, how they operate, what their legal requirements and such are. It's a pretty big dependency. Your revision control system, also a dependency. I don't know if you've noticed, but GitHub's been really getting long in the tooth lately. Your web host is a dependency. And how you choose these things is going to change how you write your code and how available it is and how it works. Your business model is a dependency. This completely changes how you think about that software you're about to write. So governance dependencies are super contextual to a given organization. These aren't necessarily things that, there's no one size that fits all. If you're Walmart, you're probably not going to use AWS. You're just not. That's not going to be an appropriate choice for you. And great developer experiences, I would argue, are going to be downstream making very deliberate choices about dependencies. So you can't make an appeal to popularity, and you can't say that everybody uses this thing, and you can't just say like this is the be-all, end-all justification for making a dependency choice, because it really does depend on your organization and your context. And that comes down to code dependencies as well as your governance dependencies. Like, if you're a business in Canada, Silicon Valley Bank doesn't necessarily make sense. So what are desirable dependencies through the lens of developer experience? I would argue stable and clear with predictable versioning is a good dependency. Something that like it's not going to break and that releases on a regular cadence. It's funny, this one actually is also like a bit of a tricky one, because I think a lot of times people will mistake activity for good. So I've had people say, oh, I'm not sure about this project, it doesn't have very many issues. I don't know, that sounds good to me. Like, doesn't necessarily, lots of bugs doesn't necessarily mean something's bad or good. Clear provenance is pretty important. As time goes on, I think more and more of us are realizing that different open source projects have different licensing risks. If your open source project is mainly governed by a private venture-backed company, and that provenance is all them, and they can change that license at any time, you can probably bet they will at this point. There's lots of evidence of that happening. If it's a good open source license and has clear governance, that's probably good. Good docs, we all agree, is useful, and we want. Ideally good types too. Humane channels for support. This is also another one that I don't think we put enough weight on. I had a dependency the other day, and their issue tracker was so busy that they don't have time to answer issues. There's no Discord. There's no one to talk to. It's like a black hole. It's a Google project. And that's a bad dependency. Like that means that if there's an issue, it's kind of on us. We might as well fork. We may as well write this code ourselves if we're maintaining it. This doesn't come up enough, but code of conduct. Our industry is pretty good about these days, but it should go without saying, but it has to be said. A good dependency is going to have a good code of conduct, and it's going to care about its community. And yeah, back to active code. I'm kind of these days a little more on the like, some software is done. Sometimes it's done. And I think that's okay. Like, we don't need to constantly iterate and change and refactor and, oh, this new way of doing assignment, now I got to change all my code to use, like, whatever. Like, the language is great. It should definitely improve, but my dependencies, they don't necessarily need to. So active code to me means responsive, but non-breaking. Yeah, lots of issues, not a great indication. Number of stars. Yeah, this one also doesn't mean anything. Stop posting charts of stars. How we manage dependencies, also pretty important. When you think about governance dependencies, this is just pain, roughly, like talking to your bank. That's how it goes. But when you're talking about code, like, got to use a package manager. This is going to get spicy. Ideally, only one package manager. I don't know why Node had to do this, but we're on like package manager number 6 right now, and unnecessary. It's like we looked at Python. We're like, yeah, we could do worse. Ideally, the one that's built in. Like, no need to like go afar for this. Vendoring's actually good. Vendoring's fine. Audit that code and just check it into your repo. I think this is like a wonderful way to guarantee simplicity and non-breaking changes just accidentally getting hoisted into your CI system. Use a security scanner, but use it to remove code, not add more. So I'm noticing a lot of stuff tends to recommend to add more stuff. And remember, the chief cause of problems was solutions. So maybe instead of adding more dependencies to fix the other dependencies, let's look at removing dependencies. And definitely look at socket security from a code security scanner. Amazing tool. It's actually one of the few use cases for LLMs that I really like. It not only finds exploits, but if very often they're minified or they're hidden or they're obfuscated, it's using the LLM to like translate that back to, oh, here's how the exploit actually works. It's fascinating. And yeah, NPM has way more dependencies with exploits than you want to know. This one's spicy. Please do not bundle your backend code. There's no need to do that. It's not necessary. You don't have to debug a file. You can debug files, plural. No build step's always fast. And debugging is going to be better. So this is something I see more in the JavaScript world, but like we are bundling backend code and then complaining when our runtime has an error that we can't debug because it's on line 1, column 10,000, and all the variables are single characters, and it's just don't do that. Yeah, breakage is opt-in rather than a surprise on send reminder. This is me complaining about Node mostly. This one might be spicy, might not. Use TypeScript with JSDoc. By the way, this is only backend code. You can transpile on the front end all you want. And practice infrastructure as code. Is your company practicing infra as code? Oh, wow, okay. It's important. Look that up and add that to your arsenal of tools. Infra as code is the idea that you can check a manifest in with your code that describes the dependencies of your cloud that you need. And very much like any dependency management type solution, you now have one source of truth. Instead of going into the AWS console or something and clicking around to like provision resources, you now can just provision resources the same as everybody else. So governance dependencies, you really want to make sure that you're aligned to your business model. I brought this up earlier. If you're Walmart, you probably don't want to use AWS. That just makes good sense. You want to prioritize trust, privacy, and safety. Yeah, trust is such a tricky one. So I'm an unabashed Amazon fan. I trust them. I trust them to do what's best for them. And, it's a big behemoth, but they don't break you. And they've got a great track record of not doing that. And so I really like that. Other clouds, they can be pretty breaky. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot in the cloud world, undifferentiated heavy lifting. The idea is we should outsource anything that's not core to our business. So if my business isn't running web servers, then maybe I shouldn't be running web servers. I should outsource that to a third party. You want to work on your core differentiation as a business. You want to work on your unique value, whatever that is. And as much as you can push off to other vendors is probably better. And so this is actually a case where you want dependencies. And you want to give as much control away as you can so you can focus on what you do best, which is probably not run a cloud. Right, so DX, it's kind of like, it's like security and performance. This is not a thing that you can just check a box. This is not a thing where I'm like, oh, now I'm performant, secure, great developer experience. This is just a process that's ongoing forever. You're going to constantly be reevaluating things, and definitely look at Dave Thomas's Modern Software Engineering book, as I think it gives us a lot of clues on how we can do that in our own orgs. So there's a lot of argument about when we harnessed fire. It might have been 1 million years ago. It might have been as kind of like more recent as 20,000 years ago. That's roughly the range of error bar that we have to deal with. Maybe there were accidental fires that Neanderthals were able to harness, who knows. We didn't get really deliberate about it until 20,000 years ago. But humans have been around for almost 1 million years. So that's a long time to not harness fire. We do know, though, for sure, we've only harnessed electricity for about 100 years. Just think about that. We were around for thousands of years, just lighting candles and stuff. No electricity. But 100 years ago, we did. And I think in tech, we often think that progress is just an inevitability. Things are always going to get better. New stuff's always going to happen, it's just going to be better. And that is not true. Progress is not inevitable. It requires asking questions. The reason we got electricity 100 years ago finally was because we started to ask better questions. And I think that in software, we could do ourselves a favor and ask a lot more questions. My company's called Begin.com, and I work on a thing called Enhance.dev. I'm not going to belabor that, but you could check it out. And I recently actually just started a blog at webdev.rip, and one of my posts is about problems that create solutions, or solutions to problems. And so to me, the best solution to a problem is to eliminate the conditions of that problem rather than add another solution which creates new unique problems, which is like a long-winded way of saying the same thing as I've said all this time. There's a ton of resources here. All of these are very meaningfully impactful to how I think about and write software. And so definitely find the time to read these books. Especially The Dark Knight and his vigilantism. Actually, I'd say really though the best one for software engineering is either Modern Software Engineering or the Malazan fantasy novels, which are amazing and you should read them. Yeah, and I think that's it, and I still have a good chunk of time for questions. So thank you.
Great talk. I was wondering if you had any recommendations or thoughts for people working in the DX space, either internally in the enterprise or products like the ones you mentioned.
Well, I definitely think you got to read Dave Thomas's Modern Software Engineering, because it's going to give you a blueprint on how to approach this stuff. Back when I worked at Adobe, we used to have these sort of pithy KPIs like time to hello world. So the faster we can get someone in the door, the better. And I feel like that was DX, I don't know, kindergarten. It's not just about getting them in the door. It's about making day-to-day life better for these people. And it is so contextual to your industry, whatever it is. If you're doing embedded systems development, the DX recommendations are not going to be the same for a guy building a front-end website. So it's like, it's tricky. I think it's a lot more about process and becoming more empirical and learning how to ask tough questions and not make them tough. Just make them more like tiny experiments and figure out what works. I also think the other thing that we don't do enough is interview our customers. And so there's a lot of really wild insights on seeing people use your software and why they use them. And just sometimes we'll just get people on the phone and be like, can you show me your deployment process? And we'll be like, wow, they have to do the craziest stuff out there. And it's so easy to say, oh, just use GitHub Actions or whatever. And big codes will not have that luxury. They'll have some embedded department that's got Jenkins servers ready to vend for you, but you got to fill out a PDF or something. And there's going to be a whole world of hurt and pain that maybe you can change and make better. And a lot of those will probably be more about people than about software, I think. But what do I know? You got to find out for yourself.
Can you just explain what vendoring is, process?
It's copy and pasting code into your repo. So back in the earliest moments of Node.js, that was the recommendation. The node modules convention was you would check in a folder, like you manually made a folder called node modules, and you would copy someone's code and dump it in there. And then the NPM thing just sort of ratified that. And eventually we were like, well, we have a package file. We don't need to install this or keep this in our repo. And I think along the way we kind of lost something there. It's okay to copy a dependency into your code if the license says so. So you should. Thanks. It'll be more stable. Because I guarantee you most of those dependencies in NPM are going to break on a minor. And they're going to do it on a Saturday.
I was wondering what you would say about the tension between, sort of pushing back against an appeal to authority inside of hierarchical, capitalism is really built on authority. So how?
Yeah.
What do you think about that, and where are the limits sort of built into the way that we're often working as developers that sort of are contingent on the structures that we're inside of?
Yeah, I remember one of my early, I don't know, I guess I'm dating myself, but I was at this software company back in 2000, and we were largely VB, and we were moving over to .NET, and the manager was like, moving to C#. It was like, wow, this is totally different. Like, why are we doing this? And it's like, because I fucking said so. And that was a terrible leader, by the way. That's a terrible answer. Now, I have learned that you can never win against an appeal to authority by pointing out that it's an appeal to authority. So if someone's like, because I said so, and then you're like, you're making an appeal to authority, they're not going to appreciate that. That's not going to work. That is a bad way to win an argument. A good way to win an argument, though, would be to kind of back up the empiricism and find some empathy. At the end of the day, though, yeah, we are in a hierarchical world. We are in a capitalist world, and it's not a democracy. And I think if you can start building in some of these processes around empiricism, people start to gravitate to wanting to be that way. Like when I say, I want to make good decisions, and I want to be a rational actor that makes smart decisions, I think most people would say, yeah, that's me too. And so you got to embody that in every way and eventually move that rock up the hill. But I mean, it is Sisyphean, and there's going to be leaders that are crummy and that just tell you got to do it. Disagree and commit was a fun one that I've been hearing a lot lately, where it's like, just disagree and commit. And it's like, well, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of our industry, and it's tough. But I do think if you can push towards empiricism and make arguments based on facts and numbers, then it becomes less dramatic. And it's just like, And frankly, actually, that bad leader who said, because I said so about C# was right, because VB is a garbage language. And it was way better to learn that and go down that road. And eventually, for that company, it was the right call. But he could have made that argument a lot better.
Hey, great talk. One question, how do we maintain the developer experience with time frame? Like we are always in time crunch for most of the features of software that we're developing. So is there any like cheat code or anything that we could use?
I think it's important to evolve a software organization away from fire drilling. And I think if you can paint a picture of a world where we're not responding to fires, that helps. It's a culture change thing. Because I've worked in so many of these companies, and it's always a sense of urgency and like ship more faster. Run really fast in this given direction. We don't know if it's the right direction, so we might have to change it. It's like, whoa, why don't we slow down and figure out if it is the right direction? I think if you start adopting a lot of the practices and tools around empiricism, CI/CD, looking for determinism in your code, so less dependencies, more infra as code, or better dependencies that don't break, you can enjoy stability and you can enjoy determinism, but it does take a bunch of work and self-analysis and asking tough questions, like maybe this isn't a good dependency if it ships breaking changes every 6 months. I know that's harsh, but perhaps we chose the wrong thing if it's breaking us all the time. And it's also about educating your leadership. You don't want tired developers. Tired developers, like even 2 coffees in, well rested, Monday morning, ideally at my best I had worked out or something, I'm good for like 4 hours of coding. At 5 hours, I'm already gassed, and I'm just creating more bugs than I'm fixing at that point. So developers that are like, grinding, doing death marches are even worse, and so your problems compound. You want to do more shorter iterations and have more empathy for the team to get these better outcomes. And I think it is about educating the leadership. Like, it's not about throwing bodies at a problem or like one of the funny things, like the mythical man month where they're like, will we be able to solve this Rubik's Cube faster with 3 people? Probably not. Like, they're just going to argue about how to solve that problem. So like, there's techniques, but it is managing up. It's and honestly, if it's a meat grinder, if it's like a games company where they're constantly death marching, you should look for another job. Which is like the harshest thing of all, but like not all companies are death marches.
I'm glad you ended on the leadership and DevX thing. I'm going to kind of segue from that. So I work for a DevX organization, and I find myself frequently making the case that we should invest in like things that fix giant developer experience broken windows, as well as like hundreds of little paper cutty type things.
Yeah.
And telling the story about the window is like way easier than the paper cutty things. But I think the paper cutty things are as much or maybe more important. So like 2-part question, like 1, am I wrong? And like 2, if I'm not, then like, do you have tips on how to tell that story?
Shit, that's a good one, man. I like that. Yeah, because I feel sometimes it's great to just build momentum. And fixing a bunch of paper cuts is an awesome way to do that. And the analogy I give for paper cuts is a rock in my shoe. I can still get where I'm going, but it fucking sucks. It's like this rock is in my shoe. It's like, now imagine your customers feel that. Like you want to get rid of all those rocks in their shoes. And if anything, I think combining these, because teams need wins to feel momentum. And if you're always fixing the big broken windows, then it's going to feel sloggy. It's like whole long sprint. Oh shit, another sprint. Oh, we're still fixing that thing. Whereas if you can just like bang out paper cut, There's also a marketing incentive to do that, because every time you fix something, you have a reason to reach out to your customers and be like, look at us, we made things better, we got rid of that rock in your shoe. So I think you're right. And I almost like paper cuts more because it feels more like stronger momentum. But I don't know. It's all contextual. Sweet. Coffee break. Thank you.